I always find it funny as a personal trainer. You know, I'll train an overweight male and he says, I got all this belly fat. I need to do a ton of crunches and side crunches. I need to get this belly fat off. And while we've known for a very long time that spot reduction is a myth, you can't burn fat off the area by doing an exercise that works that area, people still want to do it. Except in the case of leg fat. I'll train a woman who carries a lot of fat on their legs and then they say, no, I can't squat or deadlift. I don't want to build my legs anymore. And I'll try to politely tell them, like, you need to burn fat, you got to get stronger all over. But in her mind, she's thinking it's just going to grow her legs even more, whereas the man is thinking it's going to melt off all his body fat. I just think the contradiction is interesting. All right, almost everyone knows that spot reduction is a myth. Like if I have fat somewhere on my body, I can't just do a bunch of reps of an exercise that works that area and then burn fat off that area. That's a myth. Nevertheless, the tactics endure. Do you ever laugh at how when someone wants to lose fat off their abs, they do a bazillion crunches and side crunches and ab exercises? But when someone wants to lose fat off their legs, they use the exact opposite approach. They say, oh, I don't want to do squats and deadlifts. They're already too big. You might be thinking this is comparing apples to oranges because the people wanting to lose mass off their legs have too much muscle. But in my experience, it's almost always too much fat. Anyway, it's just kind of contradictory. But regardless, doing crunches won't help you lose fat off your abs. Doing leg extensions and leg curls won't help you lose fat off your legs. And avoiding squats and deadlifts won't help you lose fat off your legs either. You lean out by eating at a deficit, keeping your protein high, and getting stronger through progressive overload. Let's take a hypothetical 130-pound woman or 200-pound man. The man starts out at 25% body fat, the woman starts out at 30% body fat. They lift weights for a year, they eat at maintenance, they stay the same weight. The man puts on 10 pounds of muscle, the woman puts on 6.5 pounds of muscle. That man is now 20% body fat, not 25%, and he looks a lot leaner. And the woman, she's no longer 30% body fat, she's now 25% body fat, and she looks leaner too. But here's the deal, both of them shrunk in size. You see, muscle is denser than fat. So at equal weights, muscle takes up less space than fat. So if you eat at a maintenance and gain a ton of strength and get stronger through progressive overload, you will build muscle, lose fat, stay the same weight on the scale, but actually get smaller. You'll be a smaller version of yourself. And you'll be smaller, especially in the problem areas like the midsection, the thighs, places where people tend to store fat. So this is why I'm a big fan of total body training. In fact, one of my goals for the future is to promote the sport I developed, which I call strong lifting. And strong lifting is like powerlifting, but powerlifting is 3 exercises. It's squats, bench, deadlifts. Strong lifting is 6 exercises. It's squats, bench, deadlifts, and then also chin-ups, military press, and hip thrusts. And I just think strong lifting is a better idea because if you just train for powerlifting, you're not gonna maximally develop all your muscles. But if you train for strong lifting, you will. You hit squats, bench, and deads. You hit most of the muscles in your body, but you need a little extra shoulder work. That's where the military press comes in. You need a little bit extra work for your lats. That's where the chin-up comes in. And you need a little more extra for your glutes. That's where the hip thrust comes in. So these are the best 6 lifts, in my opinion, to work the entire body and cause you to gain mass or recomp, depending on how you're eating, and basically lead to your best physique possible. So in strong lifting, we squat and dead. I love squats and deadlifts. Always have, always will. And I also am a big champion of training for performance. I know when I started training for performance and not trying to bodybuild so much, I quit trying to isolate so much and work every muscle from every angle, and I focus on gaining strength, my physique improved, and I've noticed the same with thousands of clients that I've trained over the last couple of decades. Nevertheless, there are times when somebody I train doesn't want to grow their legs. They want to grow their glutes without growing their legs. Hence the title of this video, How to Grow Your Glutes Without Growing Your Legs. And I first wrote a blog post on this exact topic in June of 2013. That was 8 freaking years ago. And since then, half the female fitness influencers who are on YouTube have made videos on this exact topic. And I haven't yet made a YouTube video, so I decided the time was right. Maybe you want to hear it from the horse's mouth. How should you best train to grow your glutes without growing your leg? Now, my system has evolved since 2013, but it's still pretty much the same. But before I dive into that, a word of caution. Most people who assume they shouldn't train their legs hard actually should, because as I mentioned before, a lot of them carry a lot of fat on their legs, and that's not muscle. They do need muscle there, and they need to be eating in a deficit to lose weight, but they need to be training as hard as possible and eating a lot of protein to hold on to as much muscle as possible so that the weight they lose is fat. You want fat loss, not weight loss. Say you lose 20 pounds, you don't want to lose 10 pounds of fat and 10 pounds of muscle. You want to lose 20 pounds of fat, keep all of your muscle. That's how you're going to be the leanest. That's going to be how you're going to have the best body composition and look your best. And in order to keep your muscle, you got to train really, really hard. It's not easy to keep your muscle and lose just fat for weight loss. I mean, I've trained a ton of bikini Olympians and they all did squats and deadlifts and lunges. Now, granted, they're not squatting, 315, but typically, they'll do like 95 pounds or 115 pounds. They'll do like sets of 10. You might see them use the Smith machine as well, but they do their squats every week. They do their stiff leg deadlifts and their RDLs. You'll see them do lunge and single leg squat variations all the time. My point is, these women arguably have the best physiques out there and they're not avoiding training their legs. They just keep it in balance and they have low body fat levels. So you want to get down to lower body fat levels before you decide if you're too muscular or not, because chances are you're not. You just need to lose a lot of fat. That being said, there are indeed individuals who should train uniquely for their goals and should avoid training their legs too hard and should focus more on the glutes. Let's talk about the glute to leg size ratio. Let's say you want to grow your glutes, but you hammer squats, deadlifts, lunges, leg press, leg extensions, and leg curls. And let's say you just have poor genetics for building glutes, but you have good genetics for growing your legs. Say your glutes don't get that much bigger, but your quads get a lot bigger, your hamstrings get a lot bigger, your adductors get bigger. Now, even though your glutes didn't shrink, they actually look smaller because they're proportionally smaller, because it's the ratio that creates that visual illusion. So people have good muscle building genetic potential for growing their legs, but not so good of potential for growing their glutes. They're good contenders for this protocol. Now, models also fall into this category in that if they get their legs too big, they're out of a job. Their agency will cut them. You just can't have huge legs and be a model. And also just some people who consistently get hurt from squats and deadlifts and they're in this constant pain cycle who can never seem to rid themselves of these nagging pain and injuries, in the low back, the hips, the knees, because let's face it, squats and deads are the hardest exercise for a good reason. They work the muscles best, but because they work the muscles so hard, they produce a lot of joint stress. Sometimes it's very good to take like 3 months and just really focus on growing your glutes, because the exercise that isolate the glutes tend to be low stress and well tolerated, and something about the glutes just helps keep the body in check. They're kind of like the centerpiece or the keystone muscle of the body. They're right smack in the middle. They tie into a lot of things up and down the body, and from a functional anatomy perspective, they do a lot of good things for the body. They help protect the SI joint, the low back, the hips, the knees. So if you fall into one of the categories I mentioned, then you will benefit from the methods I'm about to describe. All right, so how do you grow your glutes without growing your legs? It's hard to do so because, the glutes are hip extensors, so anytime you extend the hips, you're gonna use your glutes, but you also use the hamstrings and adductors. They're also hip extensors. So anytime you do hip extension, you're gonna use your hammies and adductors to some degree, and they're also synergist when you perform hip abduction and even hip external rotation. You're never truly fully isolating the glutes, but you can indeed bias the glutes. So if you wanna increase your glute to leg size ratio, you're gonna wanna do 2 things. The first thing is to avoid exercises that highly activate your quads, hamstrings, and adductors. And the second thing you wanna do is make sure you're performing exercises that highly activate the glutes without simultaneously highly activating the leg muscles. So where does this leave us? All right, exercise you wanna avoid. Squats are out. And this includes all the squat variations, back squats, front squats, box squats. Avoid them for now. Also excluded are all single leg squatting movements like lunges, Bulgarian split squats, step ups, skater squats, pistols, single leg box squats, and also common bodybuilding movements for the quads. You're not gonna do any hack squats, no leg presses, and no leg extensions. All those exercises hammer the quads, just don't do them for now. You're also gonna avoid hamstring movements, okay? So no deadlift variations, even sumo deads, don't do them. Even trap bar deads, don't do them. Deadlifts, stiff leg deadlifts, Romanian deadlifts, they're out. Good mornings, they're also out. All the leg curl variations, lying, seated, kneeling, don't do them. And also Nordic ham curls and glute ham raises, they must be avoided. And finally, you're gonna avoid hip adduction movements like the seated hip adduction machine. Now that's not to be confused with the seated hip abduction machine. That's good to do. Now, you might be wondering right now, what about hip thrusts? Now, hip thrusts are kind of tricky because people think hip thrusts, oh, they're such a great glute exercise. They're a glute isolation movement. No, they're not. They hammer the quads and they also hit the adductors and hammies pretty good. So if you're the type that feels hip thrusts all in your glutes and not so much in your legs, then have at 'em. But if you do feel hip thrusts highly activating your quads or your adductors or hammies, then you should probably avoid them for a few months. All right, where does that leave us? What exercises should we be doing? Your main weapon is the barbell glute bridge. You're gonna be a glute bridging machine. And you can do barbell glute bridges 3 days a week in different rep ranges. You can also do feet elevated glute bridges. Those work very well. All hip abduction movements are good to do. These include frontal plane and transverse plane hip abduction movements. So ones where you're straight up and ones where you're bent over. And there are tons of these movements, you know, the seated hip abduction machine, cable standing hip abductions, sideline hip raises, extra range sideline hip abductions, and all the band exercises that are popular, you know, lateral band walks, band seated hip abduction, band hip hinge abductions, they're all good to do. Hip external rotation exercises are in. There's only one main hip external rotation exercise we do, and that's the cable cuff hip external rotation, but that targets the glutes very well. All right, I know I said avoid all deadlifts, but there is a deadlift that I do like in this circumstance, and that's the American deadlift. With the American deadlift, you're doing way more pelvic tilting, you're going lighter, you're not working the hamstrings quite as much, you're working the glutes harder. You're gonna do cable kickbacks, you can also do kickbacks with bands. You're gonna do back extensions, but not the standard way, you're doing it the glute dominant way with your feet flared out and your upper back rounded. Cable pull throughs are good to do. Reverse hyper variations are good to do. So this includes frog reverse hypers, spread eagle reverse hypers, and knee banded reverse hypers. Frog pumps are great to do. Around 2/3 of people like frog pumps, 1/3 don't. If you're a frog pump responder, bust them out. If not, avoid them. And finally, glute squeezes like RKC planks or standing glute squeezes. Yes, they're isometrics, but they work well in this scenario. All right, so I told you what exercise to be doing. How you put that together in a program, that's up to you. I've went over some programming stuff in another video. I have discussed program design topics already. I did so in my video, How Often Should You Train the Glutes? I did so in my Rule of Thirds video. But if you're looking for a cookie cutter program to follow, I actually made an ebook with the same title, How to Grow Your Glutes Without Growing the Legs. That walks you through a 12-week protocol. But in general, train your glutes 3 days a week and try to include a variety of exercises like hip thrust variations, different hip extension exercises, and different hip abduction external rotation exercises. Now, in a perfect world, we'd have all this data, like you'd take a ton of different exercises and you would look at their mean or peak glute activation according to EMG, electromyography, and then you'd also look at the activation of the quadriceps, the hammies, the adductors, and then you calculate the ratio of all those, and this way you could see, oh, this is a big bang for your buck movement, it works mostly the glutes. Or yes, this exercise works the glutes well, but it also hammers the quads or the hammies or something like that. But I've done enough EMG work and I've spent so much time in the gym training myself and others that I think this list is pretty comprehensive and pretty complete. Like, I'm sure my system will evolve 10 years from now. I'll look at this and I'll say, that was pretty good, but we know more now, so I'll tweak it a little bit. But even knowing that my system probably isn't perfect, it's still the most effective program to date at targeting the glutes and avoiding leg development. So if you're interested in primarily growing your glutes without tacking on any additional leg mass, then give these strategies a try and make sure you start off slow. When you begin training this way, give yourself some time to grow. Start off light, really feel the glutes squeezing, and you eventually want to be very strong at these glute exercises. Don't forget to use progressive overload or you won't grow your glutes. Okay, that's a wrap. If you like what you saw, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also, please leave me a comment. I'm trying my best to answer. And definitely make sure you're subscribed to my channel because I have a lot to come in 2021. Thanks for watching. So to help you guys out with this, I created this PDF that tells you which exercise to avoid and which ones to focus on. And you can download it just by clicking on the link in the caption. Now, if this video intrigued you and you would like to train under my system using my principles, then I invite you to click on the link below and subscribe to Booty by Bret and join the thousands of other happy members who are seeing amazing results.